Wellington venue for the signing is the Executive Council Room, the room where the Governor-General meets each week with members of the Cabinet. Invited to the ceremony today in both capitals are the Cabinet Ministers most involved in the 3 years of negotiation that were needed to finalise the agreement. With them, the permanent heads of the government departments most involved and business, farming and industry leaders. The Prime Minister, Mr Muldoon, is now ready. He'll be signing the agreement on behalf of New Zealand. In Canberra, the honour falls to the acting Prime Minister, Mr Doug Anthony, filling in for Mr Malcolm Fraser, who's still convalescing after treatment for a back complaint. It's perhaps fitting, however, that Mr Anthony should sign. He was a key figure in proposing the CER agreement to replace NAFTA, the old free trade agreement. Mr Muldoon will both speak and sign first.
Mr Anthony, ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Signing this document marks the end of 3 years of intensive work to lay the foundations for a closer economic relationship between Australia and New Zealand. It also signals the beginning of the next and more important phase, making the agreement work in a practical sense. The CER agreement, when it takes effect from the 1st of January next year, will establish a gradual and predictable basis for expanding the trading relationship. The two governments have responded to the clear wish of producers to be able to see the path ahead. It is now over to those who manage and work in industries on both sides of the Tasman to take up that challenge. Already in New Zealand, there are many companies well placed to do just that and to help to create the investment, exports and jobs required for our future. There is a long-term logic to this initiative. Our two countries are bound together by close ties of history, language and geography. It makes a lot of sense for New Zealand and Australia to take this further step. The agreement will not disadvantage other countries. It is consistent with our international obligations. Particular attention has been paid to the needs of the Forum Island countries with whom we enjoy a special political and economic relationship. We are, of course, fortunate that the broader Pacific region contains the world's most dynamic economies. Linked by a CER, Australia and New Zealand will be better placed to take up the opportunities they offer. Underlining all the detail of this agreement is an understanding that we both have a better economic future in partnership than we have alone. That understanding will not itself dissolve all problems. We shall have to work and work hard to develop the special relationship being born today. Both our countries are facing the most difficult external economic circumstances since the Second World War. These difficulties have already affected trans-Tasman trade. As problems emerge, we shall need to consult closely to ensure we can reach sensible solutions that accord with the aims of the CER agreement. Whatever difficulties may emerge, we are both better off with this agreement than without it. We start with one advantage. After 3 years of discussions and negotiation, each side, whether in government or the private sector, has got to know each other well. Each side has shared a commitment to bring all the elements of the agreement together. Your contribution, Mr. Anthony, has of course been particularly important. That same sense of commitment, a continuing commitment, will, I believe, be required as we begin the transitional steps towards a closer economic relationship.
Mr. Muldoon, Your Excellencies, Ministers of the New Zealand and Australian governments, the people of New Zealand and Australia. This marks a very special event in relations between Australia and New Zealand. It is an occasion which has historical significance and importance. It follows 3 years of discussions between our two countries involving ministers, officials and industry people. And therefore I think it is fitting to mark this occasion by using the latest technology so that people of both of our countries can participate. This ceremony marks a beginning, not an end. When you, Mr. Muldoon, and I sign this agreement in a few minutes, we will be committing both of our countries to expanding trade and commercial links on a scale and with a momentum that previously wasn't thought possible. In plain language, this agreement means removing all trade barriers over a period of time between our two countries. It means for New Zealand, it will be gaining a massive new market. For Australia, it will mean an additional market equivalent to something like a Victoria or a Queensland, or the combined economies of Tasmania, South Australia and Western Australia. It means that there'll be a greater selection of the use of resources for the benefit of both of our people. And by developing and exploiting those resources, it will improve the total prosperity of our people. Mr. Muldoon, I would like to thank you for your participation and your commitment to seeing that we are able to achieve the signing of this agreement today. There have been a lot of people involved in what have been complex matters to discuss and try and resolve. And if there hadn't been this willingness to achieve the agreement, it wouldn't have occurred. Both sides had to try and understand each other's problems, try to understand their viewpoint. And I think we've been able to put together an agreement which has achieved that. I'm very sorry that Malcolm Fraser isn't able to be here today to sign on behalf of Australia. But naturally, I'm delighted and proud that the job has fallen to me. I know that there are economic difficulties around the world, and some people might have thought that this wasn't the appropriate time to be signing such a far-reaching agreement. But both the New Zealand government and the Australian government believe we are better able to cope with these difficulties having this agreement in place. And I'm sure it will open up additional opportunities for industries in both of our countries. We have put into place a framework for the future. It is now up to the people of New Zealand and Australia, using their initiative, their drive and their vision to fulfil the promise that this new agreement offers.
The Australian High Commissioner in New Zealand, Mr. Jim Webster, hands the agreement to the Prime Minister to sign.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Okay.
Now in Canberra, the New Zealand High Commissioner there, Sir Laurie Francis, is presenting the agreement to Mr. Anthony for signing.
Thanks, Laurie.
Ruffy's already signed it.
Well, the signing was the easiest part of it, Rob.
Yes, I thought all the time we'd get there, but there are times when it looked a little bit sticky. But thanks for all your cooperation over a long period. It's not been easy to get through all the detail and make people on both sides of the Tasman happy that their interests were being taken care of, but I think finally we've got there.
Well, it's natural that there are concerns by people on both sides of the Tasman. I think we've done an enormous amount to develop relations and understanding between our two countries during this period, and it's been very valuable, industry groups getting together. Indeed, I see additional benefits coming from this agreement in some of our major industries now cooperating to exploit and develop third markets around the world.
I think that's right. There's been an increase in industry cooperation, and if occasionally we have one or two hiccups, well, consultation, I hope, can take care of them. And I think we've reached a new level of cooperation between the two countries, more or less, I suppose, by trial and error over the past 3 years, working our way through what looked to be very, very difficult problems. It's here, it's signed, now we got to go and make it work, and there's absolute goodwill on this side, as I know there is in Australia.
Well, Rob, you know, what this really does is reflect the realities of 1980.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't many years ago when United Kingdom was the largest market for New Zealand and for Australia.
Yeah.
Only a couple of years ago, it was our largest manufacturing market. Today, New Zealand's our largest market for manufactured goods, and of course, Australia is the biggest market for New Zealand.
Yes. Doug, I think we should pay a tribute before we close to our officials who've worked night and day over the last 3 years to tidy up some of the very difficult parts of this. We, the ministers, have finally had to make the political decisions, but I know that the effort of some of our officials and some of yours has been very, very great indeed and totally constructive.
Well, I'd wholeheartedly support you in giving a commendation to officials. I know the public at large don't know our officials and don't see the enormous amount of work they've done, but it's not the politicians who've done the work, it's these dedicated officers who've spent countless numbers of hours and travelling back and forth that have really made it possible. Thank you.
Good.
And that's it. A 13-minute ceremony to cap 3 years of at times tough, difficult negotiations. The NAFTA agreement is ushered out and CER is set to start on January the 1st. A new year for a new Trans-Tasman relationship. And that ends the special broadcast from Parliament Buildings in Wellington. Good afternoon.